that this Project 2025 is really being used to try to scare people into voting for a Democrat that they frankly have very little faith in. And it's important to understand what it actually is, because as much as Project 2025 is discussed, I find that it's very rarely explained. And I was reading an article that was published about this in Liberation News. And the article was noting that Project 2025, it's not just a slate of policies. It's not just another, policy thing that the Heritage Foundation is supplying. They actually bill it as the playbook of the first 180 days of a new presidential administration. And I was looking it up. If you go to the website, if you go to project2025.org, it literally says presidential transition project. So they're being very upfront about what this is. And what the project boils down to basically is this right-wing project to basically alter the form of capitalist government in this country. And the way that they seek to do that is by taking thousands of federal employees and just getting rid of them and replacing them with people who are appointed by Trump and his administration. Now, why do they want to do this? Because this will allow the right to do what they've been trying to do for several decades at this point, and that is to roll back any and all progressive legislation or reforms that have happened in that time period. And in doing so, will basically get rid of any obstacle to maximizing profit. And we need to remember that that is really the core issue. It's not just, the demagoguery of Donald Trump as an individual. There's a class character to this. And we're talking about things going back to the labor laws of the 1930s, of course, civil rights laws, the 1960s, environmental protection, all these sorts of things. But all of this is happening, Jacquie, at a moment of serious crisis within the capitalist system. And there is this struggle that's going on within the higher levels of the capitalist government, these elite sort of levels of the capitalist government in the US. And here's the thing, even though the elites, that not everybody in the ruling class is in support of Project 2025. It's not something that has unanimous support, but for the elites that don't support it, they've also done nothing to stop it. Yeah, and see, this is also something that, Democrats refuse to acknowledge. We're only supposed to focus on what Trump and the Republicans are doing, have done, but we're not supposed to even breathe a word about what Biden and the Democrats are doing and have done. And we certainly can't talk about how Biden has continued with a lot of Trump's policies. You can't say that. We got to save democracy.
People talked about it a little bit maybe 2 years ago. But the thing about this document that struck me, that I find interesting, is that we all know the GOP. They're a secretive lot, right? They are truly. You want to talk about conspiracy theories? No, they are the conspirators, and it's not theories that the stuff that they cook up. So it struck me as very odd that this document just magically surfaced a few years ago, right? And after reading through it, it's like, okay, yeah, they're putting this first 100 days at the beginning, but if you read the rest of the document, you realize, like you just pointed out, Sean, they've already done a lot of these things. Voter suppression, done it. Gerrymandering, did it. Reducing the power of the Black vote, did it. Limiting abortion rights, or did it. Already did it. Taking over the Supreme Court, did it. Thanks to the Democrats. And that's the part of this that is kind of weird to me, that while people are, looking at this and go, oh my God, this is a terrible thing that the GOP has now cooked up and it's a new thing. And no, it's not. It's the same stuff they've been doing since 1970. And they have slowly been able to implement some of these things. But the coup de grace, this Project 2025, that is like the end of this very long plan by the GOP of reshaping the government in their image, right? In the image that they want. And it's not that the GOP or that the government as it exists is in any way truly democratic. It is that the GOP wants complete control. And as you said, Sean, to get rid of all opposition. So yeah, this first 100 days of a GOP presidency, they're going to try to, get rid of all the federal employees. And I find it interesting that people are freaking out about, these aspects of the first 100 days, when people don't generally care about, the working conditions of federal employees. You know what I mean? That was like not a concern to people before now. Reducing the impact of federal agencies, limiting their power. It's like, really, you're concerned about the overarching power of federal agencies? That has not been something that you've been concerned about before now. It just strikes me, Sean, that people are selectively outraged about this Project 2025 because basically the debate was a debacle for the Democrats, and they have already used Russiagate. They can't get any more mileage out of that. The situation in Gaza is a third rail for them. They can't even mention that without getting enormous pushback from the people, which they shouldn't. They should always get pushback from the people for that. So people don't realize that they're literally being led by the Democrats to give a reason for why people have to vote for Joe Biden, as opposed to, wow, he really is kind of incoherent, and I'm not sure what's going on with this guy from this debate. I'm not sure if we can vote for him. We're certainly not going to vote for Trump. So I feel like the resurgence of this Project 2025 discourse, and it isn't even honest discourse, because people really aren't talking about what is in the document and what has already been done, as opposed to what they're planning to do with the next conservative president. I feel like people are not even paying attention to the fact that the release of this document and the resurgence of this conversation is awful conveniently after that terrible debate performance, where even the Democratic delegates are talking amongst themselves, Sean, about how do we replace Joe Biden? This is going to be disaster. So I really think this is just like another one of those Democratic plans to use conservative fear mongering to get people to vote for a Democratic candidate that people are legitimately questioning whether he can continue to be president after 4 years of Trump, the Trump administration part 2, with the Democrat behind the name.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's looking kind of grim for Biden. I mean, I don't like to be too predictive, but when we see, and I always try to take note of this, when we see in the corporate media these reports of Democrats openly questioning about Biden and his fitness to run and serve. I mean, people may have seen, I believe it was earlier this week, I was reading reports of different Democratic governors wanting to get on a meeting with Biden and wanting to hear from him directly and not from his handlers. And so there's some nerves, to say the very least, around what's happening here. But I did want to switch gears to talk about some local developments here in the DC area. And we're happy to be joined today by our guest, Joshua Newman of Pan-African Community Action. Josh, thanks so much for joining us.
Peace. How's everybody doing?
All right.
Doing well, brother, doing well. So glad you could join us. Now, Josh, it's my understanding that you all in PACA will soon be hosting a town hall around the issue of crime legislation here in DC, something that, you know, for those who pay attention to that sort of thing, we know that just about every time, you know, the Bowser administration or the city puts out one of these things, it's very putative, something that is almost always designed to crack down even further on the very poor and working Black communities in DC that are already being pushed out because of gentrification and displacement and all these sorts of things. It's part and parcel of this kind of assault. And so I was hoping you could sort of break down what you all intend here, you know, for the town hall. If you want to explain some more about the issue itself and why it is that locally we should be sure to be keeping our eye on this.
Absolutely. So PACA, Pan-African Community Action, is an organization based in Southeast DC. And on July 13th, coming up in about a week or so, we'll be hosting a town hall. And one of the main issues, similar to what Sean broke down, was to address a lot of the issues of essentially this internal colonialism that DC residents or Black DC residents are experiencing, especially at the hands of really the corporate elite, the issues of capitalism that are transpiring within our communities, where we see an inflated police budget that impacts the lives and residents of working class Black people. And one of the most important parts that we want to dish out with the town hall is to effectively communicate to the people that come to the town hall is that this is an act of war in terms of what's being waged on the Black working class. And similar to the words of George Jackson, the fascism that people are so tied and bound about with the being scared of Donald Trump, the fascism is really already here. If you look deeply into these Black communities, specifically in Washington, D.C., specifically in the lower wards, Ward 7 and 8, where it's a larger population of Black residents, and they're the strategically poor wards in the city as well. So,
Josh, you know, we've talked to PACA members before in the past, and community control over the police has been something that has been a campaign that PACA has had for years, almost since the beginning of the organization. How does the response or the organizational response to the rollout of this bill and educating the community about what's to come for them in this piece of legislation, how does community control over the police factor into those conversations that you all will be having with community members at this town hall?
Yeah, so PACA, we recognize that the police exist as an existential threat to our daily lives. And community control is essentially a way to wield power back into the hands of Black working class people. But it also is a way in which we can actualize participatory democracy and bring about ways that the community can strategically have control institutionally over their own lives. It's no longer in the hands of the corporate elite. It's no longer in the hands of the capitalists, the imperialists, or the colonialists. It's more so in the hands of the people that get up every day and work in that community and have a responsibility for the protection of that community. And so that's really what we want to convey, along with, like I said before, just dishing out this real understanding of how we are an internal colony, and the internal colony is really, it's really bogged down by the use of the armed agents, which are the police in our communities. So I think that's really what we want to convey. That's what we want to come across within our town hall next week. So yeah, I think those are really important points that we want to talk about.
For sure. And I was hoping you could say more about the colonial character of all of this. And people may be thrown off a bit when we use that word in this context because Washington, D.C., of course, the mayor, Muriel Bowser, Black woman, someone who I think in this country, or for people who are aware of her, has this unearned reputation of being a quote progressive. And I would argue that that also goes for much of the city government, even though it's not a white right wing administration, but still in all the things that they do, as you've laid out, have very clear harmful impacts on the most exploited elements of DC. And even in the fact of Muriel Bowser, who is from here, and the kind of comprador role that she plays, just like any other neo-colonial leader that we could point to. How does the colonial character of all of this, well, first of all, what do you mean by that? And how do we see that manifest in this issue?
Yeah, the colonial character is essentially the way in which the Black working class is exploited in terms of the relationship that we hold to the broader society, in terms of being racialized, and the economics of exploitation that are really extremely prevalent in both the wards that we work in, especially in the Southeast. And you hit the nail right on the head when you talked about the neo-colonial character of what we're dealing with. We're really dealing with a strong Black misleadership class in the DC area with Muriel Bowser, and similar to the lines of what Kwame Ture would say, there's a lot of representation, but there is no Black power. And that brings me back to the point of like participatory democracy, where right now, what we have in the United States is like a representative democracy, not really a participatory democracy, where working class people and racialized groups have the ability to engage the democratic process. There really is no democratic process in the United States. We're under an oligarchy of corporate capitalist control. And so what we essentially want to do is push back against that reality, and make it something where we have control over our institutions locally, and sort of push back against this neo-colonial relationship that's ever evolving all throughout the United States, and that is continued to be reflective of this internal colonial. Well, it's evolved into like an internal neo-colonialism situation now. And really, the colonial relationship can be tied to what we witnessed in Haiti, what we're witnessing in Haiti, what we're witnessing in Palestine, and the role that, for example, Kenya has in its neo-colonial government going abroad to work as an arm of imperialism for the United States and Haiti. That relationship is really at the crux of a lot of what's happening, not only in DC, but globally. The use of Black faces as a mask over imperialism, as a mask over colonialism. And this representation is really this masquerading of colonialism under a different name. So that's really at the crux of what we're trying to get to, and how we wish to evolve members in our community to give them the proper political education that's necessary to organize them, and as well as to fight for a liberatory and a participatory democracy that we can build locally.
Yeah, I'm glad you said, the part about participatory democracy as opposed to whatever this is that exists in this country, because I feel that even calling it a representative democracy is wholly inaccurate, because
Mhm.
the people that folks elect to represent them,
Mhm.
quote unquote represent them, I'm using air quotes for the radio here, they don't represent the people
Right.
whatsoever. So what does this mean? And I don't want you to give all the information, because we want people to, come check you out
Mhm.
on for the town hall. But why is it important to get people in the frame of mind of understanding the difference between the system in this country and how it's not really a democracy, and participatory democracy, and why that's important, particularly for working class, poor, and oppressed people to be aware of and to fight for?
Mhm. Yeah, so it's really about in our tools of analysis for PACA, we have a tool of analysis that's about organization as a science, and essentially organization decides everything. So when we talk about organizing the working class people in a way in which they can become part of a participatory democracy, it's about taking our struggle to another level in terms of organizing the people where it matters most, the most marginalized people of our community that need to be um, actually represented for their uh, identities, the class that they come from, the race group that they come from. Those are all important factors in which we need to organize our communities. So yeah, organization really decides everything, and the process of participatory democracy allows for people to actually have their voices heard, their needs met, and we come to essentially like a concrete understanding of why we're in this struggle, why colonialism and capitalism and all the things that are affecting us daily on a local level um, need some sort of pushback. And that's essentially what PACA is here to do with this town hall, is to push back against the neo-colonialism in the city, push back against the gentrification, push back against the surveillance that is occurring with the crime bill. I think all that is really important. As we move forward as an organization, as we move forward collectively as a community as well, is yeah, making people realize that what we have right now, similar to what Jacquie just said, what we have right now is not a democracy. What we have is really an authoritarian. I can never say the word, but you all know what I'm trying to say. We
Mhm.
have an authoritarian regime where yeah, like we said, the capitalists and the corporate elite, they push out politicians, and that they're essentially controlled by by this capitalist oligarchy, and yeah, we essentially want to push back against that. So
For sure. And if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Darker Than Blue on WPFW 89.3 FM here in Washington, D.C. Myself and Jacquie Luqman continue to be joined by Josh Newman. And Josh, when we talk about community control of the police, when we talk about communities controlling the institutions that govern their lives,
mm,
institutions that literally have life and death impacts
mm,
on communities, right? What we're really talking about is self-determination, right? It's a popular phrase amongst folks in the movement.
mm,
And it's clear that this idea of a truly self-determined class of poor and working Black people in DC is obviously a threat.
mm,
And what it's a threat to, it's not just the city administration, but in reality, it's a threat to capital,
mm,
because I feel like that's what a lot of this really boils down to. It's this class of folks in the lower wards, as you name, that
mm,
basically stand as an obstacle
mm.
to maximizing profits.
Profits,
And
right?
as we know, that is ultimately the aim of capitalism, is not just to generate profits, but to maximize it at any cost, including a human cost. And so I feel like that's really a big part of why we see so much pushback from the mayor's office and from the city council on things like this, because on a certain level, they recognize that their interests are not the same as the folks who are seeking to gain that community control. And so one of the last things I wanted to ask you is about the question of class and the role that they play. Because people may look and they go, well, you know, you all got a Black mayor, Black folks on the DC council and all of this. Black people seem to be doing fairly well in this town. I mean, what could you possibly be so upset about? But it's this assumption that because we're Black, that we have the same class interests. So from your perspective, what is the importance of making these class distinctions?
Yeah, definitely. And to start off, I would say that the individual successes of Black leaders, whether it be a mayor or president or councilman or whoever, is not reflective of the collective issue that is impacting the Black community, particularly in Washington, D.C. Class is essential in understanding what's happening to D.C. Part of the DC crime bill has to deal with fare evasion, and a lot of that is a criminalization of the poor. Why should we pay inflated fare? Why should we pay inflated fare taxes when the city's not looking to build jobs or create jobs for people in our communities? And then from that, they begin to criminalize you. There's increased surveillance. There's increased cameras and police presence in the metro. I think class is essential to understanding what's happening in DC in terms of gentrification. To the point that you talked about, Sean, much of this is about Black people essentially standing in the way of the city, profiting more and more. Pushing people out. It's essentially it is class warfare. It's warfare to the extent that they are willing to commit this slow genocide of African people in the lower wards of Washington, D.C., particularly in Southeast. And that's really at the crux of our analysis, is that this is a war against African people in Washington, D.C. And in it being a war, we have to enact some sort of campaign where we can create a power shift, where Black working class and Black people are able to actualize a level of power, actualize a type of self-determination and a type of democratic system where we can actually determine what's good for ourselves, what's good for our people. I'll actually be teaching in DC pretty soon, and a lot of what goes on, I meet a lot of parents, and a lot of what happens is there's conversations about the schools not having a certain amount of resources in Ward 7 and Ward 8. Through our outreach, we did surveys at one point, and much of what was discussed was that there's nowhere for the youth to go, yet the police have these inflated budgets where they can have helicopters and tanks and all these sorts of weapons and things of that nature. So it's really class warfare in a way in which they're finding new ways and more advanced and more technologically advanced ways to suppress Black people, particularly in the lower wards. So those are the type of conversations that we want to bring to the forefront with the town hall, and that we want to make our community members self-aware that this is what's occurring, and that this is what needs to be combated, and that it's essential for our livelihoods, it's essential for our youth, and I think that's what's going to be important on next Saturday.
And for people who are listening, Joshua, how can people register for the event? Where is it? Give folks all the details.
Yes. So our event is going to be, sorry, let me pull it up really quick. and I may be able to drop the link in the chat. We do have an Eventbrite. This event is only in person. There's not a virtual option, but if you do wish to keep in touch with PACA, we have an Assata Shakur study group that is every second and fourth Wednesday at 7 p.m. That is a hybrid event, and if you do wish to come out for hybrid events, you can come to that one. I'm trying to pull up this link for you all so that we can share it. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, you know,
But yes.
while you're doing that, you know, Sean, it is really important, I think, for us as organizers to do what PACA is doing, and that's to model representative democracy that exists in other countries, because we've talked about the family code in Cuba and how that was institutionalized among the people, how the government went to every community in the country and had conversations with people about the potential changes, got people's input, so that the law they came up with, the family code, really was a creation of the people's work and ideas and struggle around what a family is in the legal sense of the word, and who is protected under the family code and who is not. And it is a very different process from what we're used to.
Absolutely. And so I just dropped the registration for the town hall in the chat. And the town hall will be at 2730 Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue, Southeast Washington, D.C. If folks are available, if folks in the listening audience are available to donate, we are requesting people donate $10 to cover costs, if at all possible. And yeah, we will. It'll begin at 11 and end at 4, and it's Saturday, July 13th. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Josh Newman, we want to thank you so much for joining us today here on Darker Than Blue, and we hope to see you soon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you all for having me.
You bet.
Thank you, brother.
Peace.
Yeah, and Jackie, I wanted to swing back to our conversation around Project 2025 and the fallout from the recent debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I was actually reading something today about an interview that Joe Biden had, and I felt like his response to one particular question was noteworthy. And I'm going to read the transcript here. I'm reading this transcript on Mediaite.com, Mediaite, you may be familiar with it. But he was being interviewed by a woman named Andrea, or perhaps Andrea Lawful Sanders. And she said, quote, "My last question for you, what do you say to the people who plan on sitting this election out?"
Uh-oh.
This is Joe Biden's response. Quote, "Same thing that was said to me when I was a young kid getting out of school during the civil rights movement. If you don't do something about it, you're to blame. You're responsible. When we did in my generation, we got up and we got involved. That's how I got involved in politics." Now, Jacquie, I know that you've heard me say a million times, I know our listeners have heard me say a million times in different places, that if Joe Biden doesn't win, then it will be everybody else's fault.
Yep.
But here they are saying that months before a single vote is cast.
Yep. Uh-huh.
I think that tells us something about how the Biden administration feels about their own chances in November. You see, it's like they're trying to what's the word I'm looking for? Like they're trying to preemptively, like mentally prepare us to be blamed,
right,
for Joe Biden's failure. You see what I mean? And I just feel like I just think that's evidence of how not only that particular administration is crumbling, but how, the political crisis in the United States is deepening.
Mm-hmm.
And if Donald Trump wins, I think without question, it will get deeper. It'll get deeper. And see, this is what I really be trying to get across to people. Because no matter who wins in November, no matter whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden, the ruling class wins.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
These are the people whose material and class interests run completely counter to our own and to those interests of the masses of poor, working, and oppressed people. You know what I mean? And so this whole lesser evil ideology, this idea that I'm going to, quote, hold my nose and vote for Hillary, hold my nose and vote for Joe, hold my nose and vote for Joe a second time.
Right.
At best, what that does is delay the inevitable. And the wild part about it is, while they're delaying the inevitable, nothing gets better.
Exactly.
So and that's why this whole blame game that they're trying to play, again, preemptively, which is interesting. This blame game that they're preemptively trying to play, and I'm sure as time goes on, they'll get more specific with their targets of just who is to blame. I think that's coming. I feel like we could spin Wheel of Fortune to see who's it going to be this time.
Right.
And so while they're doing that, hemming and hawing, the Democrats are doing absolutely nothing to improve people's conditions or to even do the things they say they're going to do, like codify Roe into law.
Right.
We got to keep bringing this up. We have to consistently bring up the fact that Barack Obama, a cat that ran on hope and change we can believe in, and all this, hallelujah, good time stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Refused to codify Roe into law.
Mm-hmm. Well, why did he say?
He said it was not a priority. And Joe Biden has never supported abortion rights.
That's right.
In his political career, you won't find it because he's from this conservative Catholic background.
Yes.
And they don't get down with contraception, and they certainly don't get down with abortions. Okay, so it never had a chance. For the liberals, issues like abortion rights, it's far more valuable as a thing to dangle in front of people and say, oh, you better vote for us. Or
right.
Lose this.
Right.
Never mind the fact that they don't do anything about it when they have the power. This is a consistent thing with Democrats. When they're in power, all they can do is tell you and me what they can't do. Right. But when the Republicans are in power, they're treated like they're omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent.
Right.
It's the same office.
Yeah, the Republicans are going to destroy the government, destroy it when they're in power. When there's a Republican in the White House, when there's a Democrat in the White House, they can't do anything because the Republicans, because the Democrats somehow don't have the same access to the same levers of power, even though the Republicans don't play by the rules. And this is the thing that just blows my mind about this whole dynamic, Sean. There is that dynamic where the Democrats never admit how complicit they are in the erosion of what few rights we actually had. Well, there weren't a lot, and the further erosion of whatever little bit of democracy that existed. The Republicans could not have gotten away with the redistricting and the gerrymandering that has been done, the cutting of SNAP benefits, the cutting of CHIPS benefits for poor kids, cutting off free school lunches for poor children, not just during the school year, but during the summer too. The Republicans cannot get They can't do any of that without the Democrats not only being in the room, but not stopping them from doing any of those things. And we have to also remind people, Sean, that in many of these instances, these things were done because the Democrats negotiated with the GOP so that the GOP could be allowed to do these things like cut SNAP benefits and CHIPS benefits and school lunches, so that the Democrats could say, oh, we were able to pass this big old bill like the infrastructure bill or whatever, that still did not meet the needs of the people. So Democrats negotiated and bargained away our rights for a win on paper for a legislation that the Biden administration wanted to pass, but that win on paper has not translated into an improvement in the material conditions of the people that they are badgering to vote for the very guy who negotiated our freedoms away. It's, oh my God, this is the worst abusive relationship. You couldn't make this stuff up for a Lifetime movie. This is so bad.
Yeah, and that's bad. Talking about Lifetime movies, boy. I don't know how. I think the only thing worse than a Lifetime movie is a Hallmark movie.
Oh no, a Tyler Perry movie. I'm sorry, I don't care what anybody says. Tyler Perry movies and series are still bad. I don't care how many he does. They're terrible. Y'all just like terrible stuff. That's and I'm not even judging you. I'm just telling you what it is.
Yeah, look, Tyler Perry doesn't like to pay writers, and it shows.
How about that?
but you know, circular back to what we were saying. Here's the thing that the ruling class is missing, because there was a force that helped bring about those labor protections. There was a force that brought about the progress made during the civil rights era. There was a force that fought for abortion rights. And what was that force? It was the movement. Mm-hmm. It was not the benevolence of the US government. It never is. The government was pressured by the people's social movement. And the social movements that got that legislation passed and applied that kind of pressure has not died.
That's right.
There is still a movement that is fighting for all these things and much more. And to be clear, I'm not saying the point is to fight for legislation specifically. The point is to struggle against this all-out assault on poor, working, and oppressed people. And as organizers, I think we gotta realize the moment that we're in. This is another thing I said before. I truly believe we are in a historic moment in history.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what has happened since 2020. Massive nationwide struggle against racist police terror. The election of Donald Trump, the rolling back of Roe v. Wade, the intensifying impacts of climate change, a massive international movement in solidarity with Palestine. You know, I feel like I see all the time folks get into this this gloom and doom thing about what's going on, and I get it, because gloom and doom is all that we get. It's all that we see. We don't see anybody giving any real solutions other than vote for Joe.
Right.
But as organizers, we have to be the ones to show that the solution is us. The solution is struggle. And we have to clarify to people. Joshua was just talking about the importance of political education. We have to help people understand that power ultimately is never handed over. It's never gifted. it has to be taken. It has to be fought for. And if we don't have power, and if we refuse to struggle, well, then everything that we're discussing is only going to get worse. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly when somebody like Joe Biden, who we have been talking about this man's horrendous record, there's a reason we call him a Jim Crow Joe. There was a reason we called him that before this genocide that he is facilitating and arming and funding in Gaza against the Palestinians, now in Rafah, and who knows where else Biden is going to help the Zionist entity go after Rafah. But this man has the gall to once again flat out lie about his own record, when we organizers and people who are just interested in politics, because we understand that politics is very interested in us, whether we're interested in politics or not, right? We have been talking about his record for years. And the fact that during our people's struggle for our rights, he was negotiating with the segregationists. And he was bragging about how he was friends with these people. And this is bipartisanship. And this is how you get things done in Washington. And Strom Thurmond was one of my best friends. Strom Thurmond hated Black people. And I don't care that he had some kind of come to Jesus moment later on in his life when he was very old and he was literally like looking at the date of his death on the calendar, like, I guess I got to get something straight before I leave here. I don't care what kind of, Damascus Road moment he had on his deathbed. During his active years as a legislator, I know what that is.
I don't know what that is.
During his active years as a legislator, he negotiated with people who did not want us to have the same rights as white folks in this country. And not only has Biden never apologized for that, he has bragged about it, and he continues to lie about his relationship to the civil rights movement writ large in order to gaslight Black people into voting for him again. And it's just that there is no way we can have a conversation about this election and this without pointing out the facts. And these are not, my opinions about Joe Biden. These are things that are documented facts that he has said himself. So I am very confused, Sean, about the people who are conflicted about, what they should do with their. I don't know how you vote for somebody who is facilitating a genocide. I don't know what kind of morals you have, but that's between you and whatever higher power it is that you rocking with, that they're okay with genocide. But I think we are at that moment in history, Sean, where a lot of answers to questions that have been asked of radical organizers are being answered in real time, in real life right now. So I feel like the only people who are still asking questions about why should we vote for third party, why can't we vote for Democrats, blah, blah, blah. The only people who are still doing that are people who never listened to us in the first place and really are not doing anything to change any of this at all and don't intend to do anything differently. So I do feel like because this moment is historical and we'd be foolish if we miss it, that we have to pay close attention to who we're spending our energy and our effort on right now, because the people who are just going to sit around and keep asking questions and not get their hands dirty, get 10 toes down in the streets, knee deep in this with us, they're just an obstacle and a stumbling block to getting this system right. And I think we need to spend less time dealing with those folks and more time gathering as many people who are as angry as we are now and getting them into an organized mass.
Absolutely. And Jacquie, I think you made the devil mad. That's why we keep getting interrupted.
This must be my superpower now.
All right, well, that's going to do it for today and this week here on Darker Than Blue on WPFW 89.3 FM here in Washington, D.C. Stay tuned for news and views with Garland Nixon coming up next, and we will see you next time. Peace.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining tonight. No double feature tonight. I have no idea what was going on with that call at the end. That was very weird, but it wasn't me. No double feature tonight. I am happy to be hosting my comrades from Philly. Okay, I'm just looking at text message here. And so I'm going to go do that, hang out with my comrades, get ready for a very busy weekend of NATO counter summits, anti-NATO events, panel discussions, rally in front of the White House, and then a fantastic event wrapping it all up Tuesday evening at the Nicaraguan embassy. Very busy next few days, so I need to get my rest and eat good food and just hang out and relax before we get into the thick of it. So thanks for watching. We will be back next week for Darker Than Blue, and next week I owe you a double feature, so you'll get a double feature next week. Thanks so much, everybody. As always, be good to each other and be good to yourselves. A luta continua. The struggle continues, but I promise you, if we keep fighting, Victoria acerta. Victory is certain. Peace, y'all.